As you know, our Sunday series this month is titled A World That Works for Everyone. And today's topic is, are we there yet? You know, every parent at one time or another has heard a child ask that question, frequently when traveling, and sometimes just between the front door of the grocery store and the cookie aisle. And what adult hasn't asked that same question themselves, of their educational program, of their job quest, or of their spiritual unfolding? So, are we there yet can be an exciting expression of joy, or a hesitant one of doubt. And in a world that works for everyone, on any given day, it can depend on the person asking. It can depend on the state of affairs around them. And most importantly, recognition of the path that never ends, but oh, what a journey on that process of becoming. You know, in today's world, we can travel at great speeds to faraway places. More often than not, though, when we get there, our time clock is still on where we came from, or some way, somewhere along that path of getting there. And though the desire to try new foods in those faraway places is new to us, prepared differently than we're used to, but it's a part of our bucket list. So those are the things that we do when we're far away from home. But, you know, I have to tell you, the sight of a McDonald's or a Burger King or a Subway is like a safety net for some of us. And I have to confess to you, the morning we left Florence for Venice, when we walked into the train station, my first stop was at a McDonald's. It was right there in the station, and I picked up a bacon, cheese, and egg McMuffin. You know, I recognized the bacon that was in it, even the cheese. And unlike European cheeses and pork products that I had been trying, it was like an old friend. It was familiar to me, and it was on an English muffin, and it was the first and only one I've seen since I've been here. So this journey, this month's journey that I'm on, in a country whose history dates way back. Are we okay there, Gail?
Power on. Yes.
Okay.
Bluetooth pairing.
So let me reiterate there. This month's journey in a country whose history dates way back from the gargoyles on the top of the Notre Dame Cathedral, the cathedral whose construction began in 1163, to an underground subway system whose only visible employee is the person who drives the subway car. Everything else is automated. What a contrast in the life of this country. So I have to share my experience on the metro in Paris, because we just got back from Paris last night. We were there this week. So you walk in and you place your ticket order at a machine, which gives you 6 or 8 different languages to coach you through this thing. You get to pick the language. It tells you how many euros and euro cents you have to pay it. It asks you how many tickets you want, and when you tell them, it spits it out along with your change, if that's appropriate. The tickets are good for any line, good for transferring, good in any direction that you choose to go. You insert one into the machine, which opens a gate to let you onto the platform that you've chosen, and then it gives you back the ticket. That ticket is good for 90 more minutes. And those machines know when it's not good anymore because we tested it. And when we were past 90 minutes, it wouldn't take that ticket anymore. The doors to the trains open and close automatically. And the speed with which you're propelled is awesome. Yet it's smooth and it's quiet. And never once did I feel it was necessary to ask, are we there yet? What a contrast. At ground level, dozens and dozens of massive architectural wonders with the carvings, the sculptures, the filigree created over hundreds of years. And beneath them, a transportation system that moves thousands of people simultaneously. So I ask the question again, are we there yet? In a world that works for everyone, what does it mean to be there? Well, first we know that's an individualized opinion, isn't it? And an individualized unfolding of consciousness. And it's unquestionably a matter of how we view what's around us. And what drives that is a matter of what's within us. That's not a bad thing, you know. It just is. I remember one time years ago a friend of ours saying, "No matter where you go, there you are." On the surface, that sounded kind of nonsensical to me, but, you know, it's kind of cute. But in my later years, I got the underlying meaning to that. No matter where you go in consciousness, there you are in consciousness. So I found an article by Ernest Holmes that addresses that statement. And I'd like to share it with you. Holmes said, all people are not only a center of God consciousness, they're immortal beings, forever expanding, forever spiraling upward, forever growing in spiritual stature. Not some people, but all people are immortal, because everyone will finally overcome or transcend any misuse of spiritual law which they may have made in their ignorance. He goes on to say, whatever transformations must ensue, whatever changes of consciousness must take place before that is finally brought about, the finite has not yet grasped. But through the whisperings of divine intuition, we know that anyone can become consciously awake in the likeness of that divinity that underlies it all. We are all in the process of spiritual evolution, wherever we permit it. I was listening to an interview of Dr. David Hawkins on YouTube the other day. Some of you, I'm sure, will remember Dr. Hawkins' books, Power versus Force, The Eye of the Eye, and perhaps even one of his books written just recently titled Along the Path to Enlightenment. Actually, Dr. Hawkins wrote 21 different books, those of which were written beginning in 2001, addressing spiritual enlightenment. And in that interview, he talked about that same thing I quoted from Dr. Holmes regarding the process of spiritual evolution. Hawkins talked about his own progression from childhood to the actual moments of that YouTube interview. He highlighted, for example, the moment in his childhood when he became aware of the reality of existence. He talked about, as a young adult, his awareness of the divinity that is all that exists. And then as a highly educated adult, he talked about processing the sequences of a subjective reality to his realization that what we call the human is actually the bridge to infinite consciousness. That's a quotation that I just gave you that you may want to review on YouTube when this talk goes up there, because it's an incredible unfolding of an individual's steps in the development of a highly spiritual consciousness. In our curriculum, which is offered by Centers for Spiritual Living, there's a core class entitled Foundations. Some of you have already taken that class with me, and I think it may be time to offer it again this next year for those of you who weren't able to take it the first time I taught it. In the material within that class, there's a list of the 10 core concepts of the science of mind. And concept number 5 is titled Wholeness. And this is what it says. Spirit is a transcendent, perfect whole that contains and embraces all seeming opposites. As human beings, we have free will, and we can choose what we experience, whether it be positive or negative. The same principle that brings us freedom, prosperity, and joy also allows us to experience bondage, lack, or misery, according to our consciousness. I read that over several times, each time finding something more or different in it than the time before. The key words there, the same principle, positive or negative, according to our consciousness. I thought of the glass-walled pyramid that sits in the courtyard of the Louvre in Paris. All the other buildings are built in the French style, square or rectangular, dating back to the late 1800s when it was built as a castle. In the late 1700s, it became a museum. And in 1989, amid cries heard around the world, the I Am Pei glass pyramid was added. It's much more noticeable by its location and the materials used in its construction than by its size or its height. But there's no denying the shock effect when you enter that courtyard. Maybe positive, maybe negative, unlikely that it won't have any effect at all on you. As you step or you drive in there, I can almost guarantee you will not need to say, "Are we there yet?" Even when you go on the Louvre's website, the numerous and staid-looking buildings surrounding it absolutely fade into the background, even though it's minuscule in its size compared to what's around it. And when you Google the Louvre, the first page to show up is that plaza with that glass pyramid right in the center of the picture. So the message here is that the pyramid is a sign of the times we live in now. It's where the artistic world is in consciousness now, that created the design, that approved the design, that built the design, and undoubtedly defended all of that. So I neither laud nor curse it, simply observe that are we there yet is a question best asked every moment or never, because it's a given. And observe that over the 900 plus years of the existing of the buildings that house the Louvre, there were numerous changes in those buildings. There were additions to existing ones. And some of them were even demolished along that 900-year path. In each present moment, things change because consciousness changes, or consciousness changes because things change. One might say it's really important to pay attention. In fact, there's a Buddhist saying that goes like this: everything changes. Everything is connected. Pay attention. So oldest is not always best, any more than newest is always best. I looked at the marvel of the Eiffel Tower this past week. The Eiffel Tower, which was built in 1897, with the genius of design and construction out of the marvelous mind of Gustav Eiffel. And I just shook my head in amazement. And if you've been there, and if you've ridden those elevators that go to the top, you've experienced the realization that they don't go straight up or straight down. They go on an angle. Why? Look at the structure of that thing and see if you can figure out why. Gustav did, and then he invented how to do that. Elevators were not in circulation in 1897, at least not the kind he built. And they've been working over 120 years later, every day. So down through history, great minds have been there. Been there in creativity, been there in courage, been there in wisdom. And yes, some have been there in greed, selfishness, or fear. Those are what we would call human emotions, aren't they? Part of the package that we arrive here with, so to speak. But if you've been there in negativity, you already know you can be there in a positive consciousness just as well. And you get to choose. So I think the real crux of this idea that in a world that works for everyone, are we there yet, is best addressed by knowing where we are going and why. Because if we don't know where we're going, how will we know when we get there? For example, my objective in my life, in my teaching, in my ministry, is peace. Here's how Confucius addressed that concept of peace. He said, if there is righteousness in the heart, there will be beauty in the character. If there is beauty in the character, there will be harmony in the home. If there is harmony in the home, there will be order in the nations. When there is order in the nations, there will be peace in the world.
Power on.
So next Sunday, my talk topic is our... Next Sunday, my talk is our global vision. During the time between today's talk and next Sunday's, I just invite you to think about what your own path is while you're here in this plane of existence. Where are you going on this journey called life, and why? Then spend some time looking at the choices that you've been making along the way and considering how they support your intentions. Then grant yourself some time to honor yourself for those that are already in alignment with your intentions, and encourage yourself to change or release the others, because you're already there in terms of taking those steps for your own highest and best good. And so it is.